Hello and welcome to the Magic Of podcast with myself, Paul Rothman, and my very special guest, who is, he might be on camera at the moment or not, or I don't know if he is, I think it's still me. It's the wonderful Jez Rose. He is a broadcaster. I'm actually reading the notes because there's so many things he is. He's a broadcaster. He's a writer. Probably a best-selling writer as well, I'd imagine. He's a magician, presenter, but that's a bit wanky, apparently, and a honeybee farmer. So here he is, the wonderful, and my friend, and a lovely person as well. The lovely, wonderful, mustachioed Jez Rose. Hello, Jez.
Hello, Paul. This is a little bit like a therapy session.
It probably will be. I don't know for whom, though.
Here's a top tip, because I know you're new to podcasts, and obviously mine is award-winning and doing very well. When you say to somebody, how would you like to be introduced, and they give you the lines that you want, don't change those. So when I said broadcaster, because presenters are really wanky way and it's very two-dimensional, and you decided to go with presenter.
Oh, you weren't
when you start off on the wrong foot for an interview.
Anyway, this was Jez Rose. Thanks for being here, Jez. It's been a pleasure.
Did you dress up especially for me, or do you always look like that on these podcasts?
I'm changing it up. I'm changing it up for variety. I haven't worn a suit properly for, since the beginning of time, as it feels like.
I should imagine clothes since about the 18th of March.
Yeah, exactly. So, you are a variety of things. It is hard to pin down what Jez Rose actually is, because I think actually all of these things inform each other, I would say.
Yeah, I would agree.
So they're not a collection of sort of strange various things that you thought, I'll try my hand at. And now I met you initially through magic.
Sure. Yeah.
And that would have been at the...
Next question.
Yeah. Oh, this is like Parkinson Meg Ryan interview.
Yeah, you did. And so magic has been a constant in my life for many years. And it was something I left, actually, completely, entirely. Because I got sick and tired of it, and not of magic as a concept, just of magicians, actually, and the way that magic is broadly performed. And so I went off to do sort of other things. And actually, there was a period of my life where I really did not enjoy being classified as a magician. And yeah, I over the years, I've done all sorts of different things. The different thing with me is that I've been self-employed for a long time. And if I'm really enjoying something and I can monetize it as well in a non-crude way, I mean, you start talking about money and it gets a little bit uncomfortable because it can sound a little pious, I think, and it suddenly takes the sort of interesting shiny edge off of things, because there's a monetary gain, or there's a sort of commercial sense to it. It changes, I think, the feeling of what you talk about. But obviously, I have a mortgage to pay, and I have expensive addictions and whatever. So those need, and I have dogs that need food and whatever. So if there's a way that I can incorporate something I've enjoyed doing with a way to earn money, then I've explored that avenue. And so I think if you've known me for a long period of time, you'd say, oh gosh, he's done so many different things. And the front, the face, if you like, it's like having you set up a shop that's a sweet shop, and you decide for whatever reason that you're going to close the sweet shop, and then you learn a different skill and you set up a butcher's. And so you've become, a sweet shop owner and a butcher. And I can see how, if you look back, you think, oh gosh, you've done so many different things that are very varied. But actually the golden thread is the same throughout. There's a constant throughout everything I've done.
But you worked in the health industry. I mean, you were...
Sure, yeah. So I was in the NHS, which I cared deeply and passionately about. And actually, I didn't enjoy leaving it. But it's a very, very... when you said, would you like to do this podcast, and we negotiated the fee, I said, well, and you said that the creative angle was something you're interested in exploring. I've been thinking a lot on that, and actually one of the reasons that I left the NHS was that creatively I wasn't permitted to do what I was being employed to do. You know, there was so much red tape in the health sector, so much restriction, that you can't do what you're being employed to do. And if you are passionate about what you do, you want to do what you do to the best of your ability. And as soon as your wings get clipped, so as soon as creatively you're being restricted, it becomes, you know, suddenly not very enjoyable anymore. And certainly from a creative point of view, it doesn't become fulfilling. So that was one of the main reasons that I left the health sector, was that I was just incredibly frustrated at not being able to help other people and do my role to the best of my ability. So it was a very, you know, in the broader sense of things, I was in the health service for a very small amount of time. I think only about 5 years in total, in two very different roles. So it doesn't, you know, I don't think it...
What kind of roles? What kind of roles? I
can't tell you that. Most recently in emergency care. So I worked for the ambulance service. I was studying to be a critical care paramedic. And I don't know. In some ways I look back and I think, oh, stupidly, I left, I think, 8 months before the end of my 3-year course. But perhaps not stupidly, because I would be sat here with you saying, yes, I did a degree in critical care and I'm not allowed to use it because I'm not licensed anymore and I'm not updated and I've forgotten everything. And so what use is that? So actually, it probably doesn't matter that I didn't finish it anyway, because I think the wonderful thing about life is it takes you, if you allow it, it takes you on the journey that you're supposed to go on. And that could, I suppose, for some people sound quite ethereal and spiritual. And for other people, I think it just sounds very practical that, you know, you look back and think, actually, I'm where I am now for a myriad different reasons of things that have come together at the right time.
I mean, we go through, I mean, I go through that myself, thinking, you know, if I'd done this earlier, would I be this further down the line? Would that have opened that door? Would it, you know, but then I'm here and then I wouldn't have met that person and that opportunity wouldn't arise. But we have nothing to compare it to. So,
But that's interesting, because some people don't think like that. And so I think that's a really positive and very healthy way to think about life, and indeed relationships as well. You know, you could say, well, you know, if I hadn't met, you know, that relationship and that one and that one and that one and all my previous ones didn't work out.
Yeah.
But without that person, I wouldn't have been in that spot. And so I didn't think about that and didn't meet this person. We had a lovely time when we were together, and I, you know, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then you are where you are today. Same thing with everything. But some people very, very controlling and have a slightly warped, I think, sense of their life, that they're, I don't know, unfulfilled, or that it owes them something, or that they are, you know, that they didn't get their lot, whereas other people did. And that's a very unhealthy place to be. But ultimately, as you pointed out, it is about understanding that you are where you are because of a series of events, and you've got to make the most of where you are right now. I mean, gosh, you know, just this morning, as I was getting ready, a friend of mine texted to see if I was okay, and we've been checking in with each other. And I said, you know, I don't know where this goes. You mean, it's today here in the UK, so I guess it's maybe old news for you, but, you know, the Cirque du Soleil have filed for this bankruptcy protection thing. They're $1 billion in debt. What does that mean? You know, where are we in 6 months' time, our industry as creatives, all going to have another normal job just in order to live? Because at the minute it feels like we're just living day to day, but that's okay too. You know, as long as you're living day to day, then that's okay. It's just a different way of living your life, right?
Well, what is normal? What is a normal job? What is, you know, what is the expectation of security in your career, work, whatever? I mean, sure. there are no jobs at the moment. There probably won't be for a while, but then there will be. I mean, you know, the reality is there's various things you can buy into. You can buy into the media's perspective that is rammed down your throat. And if you go into it, actually, if you dig deeper into the newspapers and what they actually say to you, I guarantee if you look, say, in the last 2 weeks, and you went through maybe 3 different newspapers, I'd be interested to see how many headlines say, this could be the new normal, this may happen, this sort of thing might be on the horizon. Mm-hmm. All negative. So nobody says we could have an explosion of new coffee shops. We could have an explosion of new art. We may have fantastic new music. That whatever it is, or we may have more sports stores. There's so many things, and of course, there's so much technology that's been pushed forward years in a short space of time because the facilities there amazingly, and we need it, and so we're kind of reinventing it on the fly. So it ties in. It's this kind of rose-tinted glasses perception of the world, or not, and it's funny. You wake up in a bad mood. You're just in a bad mood, and that's informing your day. But the day is still the same.
Sure.
Who was talking about thought changing? I was listening to something about you. It was you, in fact. It was appropriate. It was you. So you've done a lot of talks to corporates, a lot of corporate entities, a lot of private companies, and there was a TEDx talk that you did, I believe. And
I've done two. I've done one in the States and one in the UK.
And these were big affairs. And one of them that I picked up on, you were talking about this very thing about thoughts, about changing your thought, and how impactful that can be.
Sure.
And I think
it's been a sort of big part of my work for almost all of my career. Whether it's everything I do. Now everything is focused on nature, and I ran this research project to evidence the impact that nature has on human health, well-being, and behavior. Bought the farm and ended up where I am now, and so everything is very much that the front end is very much nature focused, but the golden thread throughout everything has always been about changing behavior and thinking differently in order to achieve different results. And so actually the cornerstone of, while it all is wrapped up in a sort of bundle of nature and environment and sustainability, the cornerstone of that is thinking differently about the way that you interact with the world in order to maximize your positive impact on the environment. It's all about, it's the same thing. It's, when I talk to leadership teams, it doesn't matter what the organization tells me is wrong. Fundamentally, it's going to come down to how those individuals think differently in order to affect different results. Because, look, I've been speaking for 15 years. This year's year 15, I think. To at conferences and events all over the world, literally all over the world, 24 different countries I think we counted last, and every single one of those organizations almost exclusively, at the end of every year I go through my notebook, because every time I do a conference call to kind of do some exploring, I write notes. At the end of every year I go through that notebook, sort of a ritual I've had for a few years now, to see what the common themes were, what we're picking out. And whenever they say we're in a unique situation, or we've got a very unique set of circumstances, or this is a very new or exclusive problem for us, I put a little asterisk next to it. And increasingly over the last 5 years, everybody's got a unique problem, and those unique problems are all the same, which is interesting in many ways. I like to look at that and think, well, isn't that interesting that you are so introverted with your own problem that you haven't looked elsewhere? It's that whole thing when someone says, oh, how do I do this? And somebody else says, have you Googled it? Oh, no, I haven't. Well, you will not be the only person in the world who has had that problem. There will be an answer like there. And it's interesting in the corporate sector, you don't really get that. So the idea of getting people to think both, people, right? So whether you're at home or at work is irrespective. Getting them to think differently about the way that they approach something. I forget whose concept this is, and it's started to be used quite colloquially, and it's a shame I don't know who it is. I'm really well read. I read a lot, but I don't think I've ever read this. I might well have done, but I've heard it lots. And it's the idea that fear and excitement are the same, almost identical biological responses, in the sense that it's a flooding of adrenaline, tiny bit of cortisol, and it's your brain that changes whether or not you're scared or you're excited. Because ultimately your body's doing the same thing. You've got an elevation of blood pressure, elevation of heart rate, secondary to elevation of adrenaline, a bit of cortisol in there as well. And so something stimulatively has created that to happen. But your brain saying, oh, I'm excited for this to happen, or I'm scared that this might happen, or I'm fearful of this. But they're the same response, ultimately.
Maybe one without the paralysis.
Yeah.
Because fear and panic bring on paralysis. They bring on that.
Yes. Well, they're interesting. I mean, it'd be something I don't think you would ever be able to test. You're talking about the flight or fight response, the moment before that.
The car's coming at you, you see it, and you just tense. Sure. You can't react to it, whereas...
That's different, because, of course, you would never see a car coming toward you and be excited about that. So the stimulus has changed your interpretation of the event. But if you were to jump out of a plane,
right,
some people are so excited about that. And I mean controlled, as in...
Like, this is great.
Yeah. Whereas other people would be absolutely petrified. But the same thing is happening inside. Or a job interview. Some people won't be, I love going... Or an audition. Some people love auditions. They thrive for auditions. The vast majority of people probably are very... anxious about auditions and nervous, but it's the same biological response. It's just the way that you think about it.
That moment when you're just about to go on stage, it's that. It's
yes.
Do you get that?
Exactly.
Do you get that moment where you question everything at that point? What? Why did I do this? I've just got to this point. The curtains. They're doing the intro, and then there's that moment where you go, really?
Yeah.
Really?
It's the loss of control, right? Suddenly, at that moment, it's too late to back out. So there's this pressure, this wave of pressure comes over you because you can't do anything about it. And you think, well, hang on a minute. Up until this point, everything has been controlled by me. The fee, the contractual terms, my rehearsal, the props, which color of this I chose, what I wore, how I wore it, how the things are on stage, whatever it is, everything has been controlled up until that moment when suddenly you're about to walk on and have zero control at the most important part, right? Because the audience is an entity. And yes, we can manage those people and we can guide them, but only to an extent. You know, they are going to be how they're going to be. Some are going to be warm. Some are going to be cold. Some are going to be very, very energetic. Mm-hmm. We don't have a control over that. We can try to mold it, but I don't think it's that moment where you go, I don't have any control now. I hope this goes well.
And then it's kind of, it's lovely, and then it's real, and then it's in the moment, and then it's kind of full circle to what you were just saying about living each day in the moment, in the now, because that's all there really is.
Sure.
There's that idea of that if we're living in the future, we're living in panic. If we're living in the past, we're living in nostalgia. But if we're living in the now, in the present, we're in the now. We're in existence. We're dealing with what's in front of us.
The fascinating thing, of course, is that very few people live in the now. I mean, it's a precept of Buddhism and mindfulness and sort of waking sense. There's a bit of a movement in that now, and probably picked up a bit. But interesting, it's been picked up. The primary focus being on stress relieving or clarity of thought or something like that, and not about just the importance of living in the now. But then, biologically, for thousands of years and many generations, we are future-led species. We sow seeds in order to grow stuff that we'll need for the later on in the harvest. We think about what we need to go and hunt and kill because it needs to support me or our family over the winter. And this has happened for generations, right from caveman times and before. It's about the future. How do I protect and work towards the future? So it's sort of little doubt that that's still a very key humanistic characteristic for our species, but it that manifests in lots of strange ways that I think probably is destructive for us.
And it's the sense of, everything. There's an absolutism to a lot of statements and platitudes, and we're filled with that now with social media. Here are 3 words. It encapsulates everything, and therefore, if you don't say it loud enough, you don't believe it. You don't believe it enough. You're not involved. There are many examples of that, which we won't go into. But there is that sense that the planning. I think it's really the idea of jobs for life that disappeared quite a while ago, and I think it's changed more and more and more. I mean, the thing I noticed in America is that people here tend to have 2 or 3 jobs. It's quite a common thing, even if they do, whatever they do. They'll have what one would be considered a career job, but then they still do something else on the side.
Is that a social demographic thing, as in their rent is, I don't know, abnormally high, and so they've got this career job working for brand non-specific corporate entity, but they also do a grocery, a couple of hours in the grocery store to help put their kids through school, or what's the driver for that? Why is that?
I get I just find that the American psyche is much more driven to really working and really just doing so many things. Not necessarily that that's effective, because there's this kind of also this mentality of, if I'm seen working 12 hours in the office, then I'm working, rather than I can do 3 hours.
I mean, I wonder whether some of that is driven by the American dream still, right?
Yes.
I mean, because I would say Americans are, I've worked lots in the States.
Yeah.
I lived in the US, and, many of my clients are in the US. So I spent a long time traveling and working there. And it's, I've always, and very publicly, called it my second home. I step off of that plane in the States and I just feel home. It's lovely. And so I think I can say this with some qualification, that there is a drive. They are much more driven about work. There's much more corporate attitude, I think, generally. And my sense is that's very much the American dream. It's very much that here is the model that you buy into. Because otherwise, why would so many Americans wear chinos and a pale blue shirt? It's a cookie cutter approach, because and that's not being patronizing. It's fact. That here's the dream, here's the model that you follow, and that's the same for you can multiply that out. There is a model equivalent of that in Germany. There is a model equivalent of that in probably the arts industry, actually, globally, but particularly in France. And Spain, actually similar. I don't know what that is in the UK. I don't know what our archetypal corporate model is, or work model.
Yeah, I think it's... to me, it feels, in a lot of sense, we feel more modern in the UK than I feel in the US. There's
progressive,
modern, progressive, forward thinking, perhaps.
That's true. Yes, I would definitely say that, because my experience in the States is that there is a slight element of nostalgia, a slight element of we've always done it this way, or we don't even question that because that works, right? That's the way we've done it. I can understand that.
Which you're seeing with a lot of the problems. I mean, you're seeing with the
sure.
with the protests, the riots, and it's quite interesting. I was having a conversation with a young guy the other day. When I was in a restaurant when they were open again, briefly, and he had been to the riots. Well, the protests, but he'd been amongst the rioting, and he was interested in my perspective as an English guy. And I actually said, well, none of you have travelled. I said, I tell you that, none of you have been anywhere. Like, you've got strong opinions, but they're not based on much. And I was doing it in my typical English way. But he responded quite positively to that. He's like, yeah. I said, well, most people here don't have passports. I mean, they haven't left the country. So as modern and creative and forward-thinking as they may feel they are, the broadness of their experience and worldliness is not informed. So he talked about the rioting, and he said, but without the rioting, corporate America would not listen, and the money people would not be listening, and we needed to smash those shops in order to make a point and make things happen. And I said, well, that's an interesting point, and listen, I'll take that on board. I disagree, because I actually think had the protests been peaceful throughout, which is no reflection on the protests, because there's many, many different groups that link onto these things and take them in different directions. But if they had been super peaceful, and I'm not talking from just the protesters, I'm talking from the authorities and the police and the governors and everything else. I think it would have had an amazing effect. It would have been fantastic. And it would have been harder for the people who want to attach left-wing extremism or right-wing extremism to it. I think they would find it harder to do so. But the reality is, like all things that we're dealing with now, it seems to me that it's this polarized view that you can only have one point of view, or it has to be over to the right or it has to be over to the left, and that's it. There's no nuance anymore. And you deal in nuance, you deal in communication, you deal in the subtleties of reaction, thought, sensitivity, feelings, even though you can be quite cutting and ironic and all of those things. But that is the whole, that gives flavor. That's what makes us interesting, I think, as human beings.
I think, if you finished now, it was really long.
That's all right. It was.
Going back to...
But there weren't many pauses. It went...
No. Going back to the original point, if you don't mind us getting back on track. And you were saying about thought. So everything you've just said is... it was beautiful, genuinely. And I agree. I think I would have disagreed about that's fascinating for me as a behaviorist. I think, well, why that somebody feels that the situation is such that the only way anyone's going to listen is violence. That's it. That's the only way. We're there. We're at that extreme. And that's a very sad situation to be in, and understandable. Mm-hmm. But one of the places that I visited quite often is Greenville in South Carolina, which apparently is the best of all the Greenvilles. Somebody once told me there was a Greenville in every state in the US.
Oh, really?
Yeah, apparently so.
I'll just get my assistant to... Can you check that, John?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there is a... now, bear with me, and if you're from Greenville, please write into Paul or me or whatever. But I don't want to Google on my phone and stuff to get the exact details, so I'm going to be careful about what I say. But broadly,
I'm going to kind of try and look it up as you're doing that.
So broadly, there is a plaque, a brass plaque on Main Street in Greenville, mm-hmm. that commemorates a group of young black children from the school who were prohibited from attending the public library because of the color of their skin. And they protested by sitting on the steps of the public library every day. So people would have to walk past them or whatever. And it helped turn the tide to raise the issue of racial equality in Greenville. And of course, it's just a little more palpable because of where it is in the States, right? It's, it's in the southern belt of the US. So, and Gandhi, and there are controversial things about Gandhi's life. And actually the interesting thing is, of course, there are controversial bits about most people's life, because we're not going to please everybody all the time. The bigger you become and the more people that follow you, the more eyes are on you. And, nobody can not do any wrong. I mean, look at Mother Teresa. She had a phenomenal amount of good stuff. And yet there's some controversial things about her and her way of thinking too. And everybody you look at, actually, there are controversial things about what they did. So, almost exclusively.
And both ways, actually.
Yeah, sure, absolutely.
Yeah.
And so there are fantastic historical examples of people peacefully protesting and creating significant changes in society and the way that people think. And I sincerely believe that it's it's a longer game. You've got to be in it for longer.
Yeah.
Because, if I say to you, you should really try and be nicer and kinder, that you may forget that tomorrow. If I hit you around the head with a cricket bat and say, I'll do that again, unless you're kinder and nicer, you're going to remember a bit quicker, right? But of course, the irony being is that in order to get you to think in that way, I've had to force it. And we know that human behavior does not work. Punishment is not a long-term strategy to change human behavior. There's this bizarre, we cage animals, we still put people in prisons. We have this weird fascination of humans of putting things in cages, of restricting movement, of locking things up. And yet it doesn't work. The criminal justice system globally is failing and crippled because the reoffending rate is massive. There are whole organizations dedicated to reoffending, to that bit after you've been punished.
Yeah. And
yet the irony being is that I don't know of any psychologists or behaviorists that have been consulted to change that system, because the system changes most effectively at the beginning, not the end. And that bit is the bit that hardly anybody focuses on. And that's my playground, is how do we change this at the beginning? Whether we think about this or engage with it, dare I say, feel about it. We can't say the F word in the corporate sector. Nobody wants to hear about feel or love. Absolutely, we'll change that. I have a concept that was taught to me by a teacher at school many years ago, and it's the concept of dignity, love, and respect, right? Dignity for yourself and others, love for yourself and others, respect for yourself and others. And it's a sort of triad. It's a system that I use and apply in almost everything. And I offer it to organizations that will kind of create a cultural shift based on dignity, love, and respect. And they love it. They are amazing. We love it. And I explain all the different elements. Yes, I think we'll need to change love, though. And that happens 95% of the time. Isn't that interesting? We're a sentient, emotional human being. Love is what every single one of those people have, give, and need as a fundamental a part of our existence as human beings. And it's the one thing that corporately they said, we're just going to remove that. Actually, I don't think that doesn't sit very well with us as a straight corporate organization. And that, going back to your original point, is I think where things start to fall apart, is that we feel that we have to segment and box and put away being human, or elements of being human.
So can we be mended? Can we develop? Can we change? Are we fundamentally one thing and pretending to be another, or do we have the capacity to change and develop? I mean, I know the answer to this, but I'm putting it.
You very kindly mentioned my internationally best-selling book, or one of them, and I'm writing another book at the minute. And
just remind us the title of that book.
Which one? The one.
There's 4, I believe, aren't there?
I think only one is still in print, which is Flip the Switch.
Flip the Switch. Yeah. Nobody wanted the others.
Well, the others, to be fair, are really old.
Yeah, and they're good. Because I've got a dodgy door, and I've got one of them. It's fantastic.
Yeah, no, they're great for that kind of thing. Yeah, absolutely. Or if you've got a least favorite child and you run out of gift ideas.
And toilet roll.
Yes. Oh, Paul, come on now.
It's fun. You get to look at a word each time you wipe.
So if you can hear scratching, it's because my dog is. I have a not soft carpet in this room, and the dog is kind of moving around on the floor. So that's what you can hear, rustling and scratching.
We'll bring him into the podcast.
Yeah, Zeus can have a little cameo. So the book I'm writing at the minute, quite a significant part of that is Existential Crisis, because I believe that whether you acknowledge consciously, subconsciously, it and the presence of it, I think almost everybody at some point goes through a moment of questioning how they got to where they are, who they are, whether they're in the right place and space. And the existential crisis is very real. And when we talk about, we mentioned this kind of cookie cutter approach, and we used corporate America as an example, but that is globally, it's the it looks different and it feels a bit different, but it happens everywhere. That's my dog as well, just being sick.
Yes, that wasn't a small child hidden in the cupboard there.
He has renal failure and he's dying.
Oh.
And one of the sort of side effects to renal failure, in all species actually, is a kind of a retching. So is that
Zeus?
That is Zooey. Yeah,
he's Zeus. A black Labrador, isn't he?
Black Labrador, the big bear.
Yeah. It was just when I came to your home, your farm.
We don't have to talk about it.
Not that bit. That's forever private. Other than the pictures, but that's for another day. But no, I loved you feed Zeus. You do the scatter feeding approach.
Yeah,
something I'd never seen before, and it's amazing. It was an amazing.
Well, it's
thing.
Great stimulation for them. I mean, how boring must it be just to eat it's the same food every day of their life, right? And just eat it out of a bowl. It's crazy. The wasted opportunity. I worked with a guy called Dr. Ian Dunbar, who was the guy who popularized puppy training, actually. I mean, he sort of invented how we do puppy training now with the lure reward concept of here's a treat, follow it. And if you do what you're being asked to do, you get the treat, and then you remove the bribe, remove the lure,
right?
And train the puppy. So sort of non-forceful, hands-off approach to puppy training, because previously it was all punitive. It was punish the dog until it, basically submits and is fearful of you. It was Ian that introduced me to the concept of enrichment for animals. And actually, I thought, you know what? There's an interesting thing in enrichment for humans, isn't there? We don't consciously think about enrichment of our lives and actively doing.
Just to explain, if people don't know what scatter feeding is, you literally go out into the front yard, the garden, and throw the biscuits all around.
Sure.
And it's amazing. The dog loves it.
Yeah,
absolutely loves it, and they forage for the food, and it's great.
He
told me, he gave me a little sidebar. He's like, I wish you put it in a bowl.
Yeah. I don't know why he does it.
I'm knackered.
He's mental. Look at him throwing my food over here. What are you doing, you idiot? Because he's not very well, he has to have it in a bowl now with water, and it has to be soaked up and stuff. But I still do scatter feeding with frozen peas or bits of chopped up carrot, because they're stimulating. The sniffing, having to find it is a game. It's a good bit of. But also, here's a classic example of thinking differently in order to get more extraordinary results. And it was people like Ian that really got me thinking about ways that we could do this every day, rather than it being a big life event or, a corporate structured, right, we're going to do a workshop on thinking differently and how we're going to, get to this point. And then when we've done it, it'll be fixed. Whereas I'm constantly thinking push boundaries all the time, every day. So you've got something and you think it's finished, let it sit for a bit or not, and then keep pushing more. So how could it be even better? And how can you, don't disregard the journey that got you to that point. That's wonderful. But is there a way that maybe we could get it even better still? And so the idea was you measure out the dog's daily food allowance, and each one of those pieces of kibble is a training reward. So if you're trying to get your dog to stop barking at the door when the post guy arrives or post lady arrives, or you want them to heel when you go for a walk or not pull on the lead or something, you take that weighed daily food allowance that you were wasting by just getting to eat in a bowl, and within 30 seconds it's gone, and you use that food for a training session. You put it in your pocket. That's the dog. You put it in this will be forever remembered, or a nightmare to edit.
Oh my God.
Good boy, mate. It's because he's not eating yet. You're interrupting his breakfast time. Good boy. So you use each one of those little pieces of kibble to reward as you go throughout the day. So you use them effectively to change behavior as you go on.
Maybe we should do that with humans.
Yeah.
Well, here's a bit of steak.
I agree. But if you take away the food concept, the reward is whatever you find rewarding. Anything You can use anything as a reward. It's just that, for dogs, particularly Labradors, food's a good starting point.
And I don't mean this facetiously at all, but it actually does work with humans, and food food is a driving force. And I know, with relationships, if I was in a bad mood, quite often my girlfriend would know Paul needs to eat. Give him some food, he'll be all right, and he'll stop being such an arse.
Chocolate or sweets, they're often, you can restrict those and use those as a reward. But, some of the most useful and efficacious rewards are ultimately built on kindness. So, a handwritten note that says, I hear you're doing really great things. Thanks very much for your contribution. That's equally rewarding as, a gift voucher or a bottle of wine for somebody that doesn't drink alcohol or something like that. But it's the minuity that is interesting, because you were saying about me being interested in the finer detail of things, which is, I don't know where that's come from, but you're absolutely right. I'm obsessed by fine detail. For me, the finer point there is that you've got to work out what it is that reinforces an individual's behavior. So I don't drink alcohol, so if you gave me a bottle of champagne and said, thanks so much, I'm not going to be driven to want to do that again, or especially better next time, because I don't drink. You give a diabetic, which I did genuinely see at a conference, this massive hamper of Cadbury's chocolates. I mean, it was huge. It took 2 people to carry it off the stage. It was massive. And I went to see this lady afterwards, and I said, huge congratulations. That is an amazing thing. And she was a bit sort of sour person, sort of downbeaten about it. Mm-hmm. And I said, are you not? I mean, what they said you did was incredible. And I forget the exact details of it now. It was customer service based. And I said, you must be so proud. And she said, well, yeah, I mean, look, I don't want to be ungrateful, but I'm diabetic. I mean, you couldn't get more made up or ridiculous, right? I mean, so they surely knew she was diabetic, and someone just decided that the blanket reward that we'd give for somebody would be a massive hamper. And it so happened that she won, or was voted as, top customer service person of the month or whatever, and got this massive hamper. Well, that's a really, really, it's a waste of money and a poor way of reinforcing behavior. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. I mean, something would be like a nice pen would be a lovely gift, perhaps.
Sure. Or like you tailor it to the person. So, because it might be that she's got kids and she works a lot, and maybe she's got a very, very busy working life balance between her partner. And actually, the thing that she'll find most rewarding is to go and pick her kids up from school, because she doesn't get to do that, or to go home an hour early so she can spend time with her kids that she never gets to do. It's fantastically simple to change behavior. It just takes a different way of approaching it, a different way of looking at what you've got.
Now, you approach customers in this way. You definitely do this. This is something we've worked together on a few things, and I went and did a marketing seminar with you, which you led, with Lee Warren, and
I would call it a business development seminar rather than I know that marketing.
So it was business development and marketing, and it was for a bunch of magicians, very small group of elite magicians.
Yes. Well, yes. Let's say yes.
Yes. Yeah. There were a couple of elite magicians, and there were.
To be fair, you were all.
There were a few others. We were all handpicked. Yes.
You were. We were elite.
We all had money. And
yes, I think that's really what it was.
We had a checkbook. No, it was amazing, and this lasted for 3 months. But what was important about it was about value. It was very much from your perspective, or from my perspective. How can we make this as good as it can be? And it wasn't based on the time finance quotient. It was just how if I were to make this as good as it can be, how can it be that good? And so, I mean, one of the outcomes was, for me, I was kind of coming out to the States at the time and changing my marketing and my business and looking broader, and the website. I changed my whole website based on specifically actually what you talked about and the people who you'd worked with your website, and But it's a very hands-on thing, and you're a very hands-on sort of person. And the interesting thing, so we looked at your website, and your website's constantly developing and changing, and and it's being refreshed and relevant. And I think my initial point really was also the way that you get back in contact with customers, or you send Christmas cards, or whatever those things were. They were never the norm. They were never the expected. So no one's going to get the diabetic is definitely not going to get the hamper of Cadbury's chocolate. No. What was there was a Rubik's Cube thing that you did?
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah. And actually, to pick you up on something, none of my clients get Christmas cards.
Well, you definitely
New Year's cards.
So there we go. Exactly.
Because everybody sends Christmas cards, so you end up with, like you're one of many in the office. Hardly anybody sends a Happy New Year, wealth, prosperity for this year. So you become the only card left on their desk.
Absolutely. So that's a perfect example of creative thinking.
Yes, sure.
Creative thinking. And we talk very much about this. We talked about, because we both do, well, you do a broader sense of things. You've worked with a lot of different companies in different ways, but talking about magic and team building and creative thinking. And that was something that we kind of got to. When I was building what I was going to do, it was like, well, what is it you actually do? And we dug into it and said, well, it's about creative thinking. And in a sense, even this conversation and these podcasts, it's about creative thinking, or being creative, and what is the drive, and what is interesting about that, and why is it interesting? I mean, there seems to be such a huge demand for this stuff, and people are intrigued. And why is it some are more interesting than others? But we want to hear. We want to delve deeper. We want the nuance of conversation.
Sure.
We want the nuance of finding the answer, changing people's minds, being adaptable.
We've been sold the easy stuff for a long time.
Yeah.
We've been sold a lot of marketing crap for a long time. We've been sold the low-hanging fruit, and the same rhetoric has been banded out. And I've always said to all organizations I work with, or all individuals as well, because I still do a bit of private consultancy, the challenge for me is that it's one of the stuff I love most, I'll be honest, Paul, is the private stuff. But the problem is when you reach a sort of earning threshold, it pushes most people out, because for you to say, can I have a day of your time for you to guide me through stuff? That's a day of my time. I can't work on my business, but also that somebody else can't, pay me to work on a project that has a much more significant fee. So finding the sweet spot to be able to say, yes, that's fine, but I'm not 150 quid, and I'm not 500 pounds either. So, immediately, right. And the people that need that information, that want access to that, probably don't necessarily have the fees that I need to charge to warrant, giving you. But the rub is that I'm not going to sit and give you rubbish. I'm going to roll my sleeves up physically and metaphorically and get into what you need to get, because you don't leave the house or the farm until we're done, right? You arrive with the set of problems and you leave with them solved or some solutions for them. So, but it's the tiny little detail is where the magic happens. And often it's the simplest of things is where the real magic happens. We're doing masses of work at the minute with one of our brands here. And I mean, it feels like we pull every gear out of the business, every cog, every tiny bit of it out. And I keep finding bits and I go, that's why this bit over here doesn't work, because this tiny little thing, there's like a little rub there, a little kind of jam, and you solve that tiny, and the tiny bit was a graphic. And it's a bit difficult without going into context to explain it, but that's the detail, is that if this graphic isn't right, it's going to jar, and that changes the customer journey. So by the time they get here, they're not going to behave how I want them to because of something that happened over here. And you can multiply that out in many different ideas and concepts. But it's the same thing with magic as well. Magic isn't something I perform as me. I have a pseudonym, and it's something I don't talk about as a core. It's a distant brand. I do it over there out the way because it becomes really confusing. So we go back to the beginning, and you were saying, oh, you do so many different things. Well, I do, and some of them conflict, actually. And I think also there's an element of, you can't be everything to an expert degree, because it takes time to invest in each of those things. So I think there needs to be a balance, and there's different bits of my time and investment goes into those different areas. But the same thing with magic with regards to the detail. I spent, I reckon over £1,000 on playing cards to find the right ones that because it's the right one that makes the difference. Yeah. Obviously, technically, it has to be good for me to handle in order for me to make the magic happen.
Right.
But more importantly, it also has to look right for the character, fit right for the environment, all that kind of jazz. And, it's that level of detail that I think is missing from magic, coming back to an earlier discussion point that we touched on.
Yeah.
But I think it's that level of detail that's missing from an awful lot of brands and an awful lot of perhaps creative thinking. Coming up with ideas is easy. Coming up with the right ideas, or ideas that fit or that resonate, that's more complicated.
Yeah. The creative impetus. It's interesting. We use the word magic. You were using the word magic not in the context of magic, but in the context of business and context of creative.
Yeah. The magic.
And I think that's what's so wonderful about magic as the performer, as what we're doing. There was a thing, I don't know if you saw, Luke Jamay did this little thing just the other day about the meaning of abracadabra. Did you see that? He just put it up. It's a lovely little video, worth checking out. And he talks about, what is it? I create, I'm going to remember what it is. The meaning of abracadabra itself is, I think, therefore I create, or I make it happen. I'm going to look it up again. But it's a wonderful, it ties into what we were talking about with living in the moment and creating our own universe and putting on our own sunglasses, our own perception. So yeah, here we are. So abracadabra is an incantation used as a magic word in stage magic tricks, and historically was believed to have healing powers when inscribed on an amulet. And I believe so it came from the Aramaic, and it's in the Old Testament and the Hebrew. I will create as I speak. It's a wonderful concept. I will create as I speak. So I will make this reality happen by the virtue of my thoughts, my words, and my actions.
Sure.
And that ties us back to this to magic itself, and what is magic and why are you interested in magic? Where it's so we were saying all these things are disparate. They're all interconnected things that you do, and they're not. They don't fit together, and yet they totally fit together. Because you talk to a business person, I will create as I speak. That's what I'm going to do for you. I'm going to help you look at your business now and going forward, but I need to see what the now is in order to go forward. And I that sort of just struck me as something fascinating with that.
It's lovely, that concept of I create as I speak. If only more people perhaps considered that before they spoke, and also before they committed, the world would be a very different place, wouldn't it? But then I suppose there's a problem generally with human beings, is that we don't think about consequences. We think about, ironically, we're talking about, it's really important that we think about the here and now, and that we are future led but we're future led in a blind way, because if more people were to think about the consequences of their actions or the consequences of their behaviors, it would give you time to potentially readjust and choose an alternative behavior in order to achieve the most desirable consequence, which is almost the antithesis of, but looks the same as to how we live our lives. So we're saying actually you should live your life in the now. On the other hand, I'm saying you should think about consequences, which is future-based. And then I'm saying, well, we're always looking towards the future, and we don't think about the here and now. We neglect that because we're too busy thinking ahead and charging forwards and missing the moment, which on the other hand, I'm saying, yes, that's what you should be doing. You should think about consequences in the future, but they're entirely different. It's ironic, isn't it?
And if we don't look to the past, we're doomed to repeat the patterns of the past.
Yeah, sure.
So we have to look to the past as well. So everything I said is absolutely nonsense. No, it's not nonsense.
But it could be interpreted that way. You're like, well, hang on a minute. That's a juxtaposition. So the point, though, is the multiple levels of life that we live. So, from a kinesthetic, from a spiritual, from a sentient point of view, we need to be much more in the now, in the present, to not waste the moments that we have. And those moments that get bandied around are life, are breathing, because that's a gift that no bookie, what's a bookie in the States?
I don't know. They make up all
betting office.
They make up all these words here.
I don't know.
They take our words and they change them. And
sure, I don't know what. I found out. I've never seen a bookies in the States. You have a bookie in the States? What?
No, I think it's
like
illegal.
A betting agent?
No, I think a lot.
Oh, is it?
A lot of states, it's illegal betting.
You've got the lottery. That's the only betting I know about. Oh, and gambling like poker.
Yeah, I think they are bookies as well. Like in The Sopranos, maybe they call their bookies.
Okay, fine. Yeah. So, it's slang, right? From having the book is where it's come from. But so my point is that nobody's going to give you odds for waking up tomorrow. That's the bit that we need to not waste. Is that it's about the living in the here and now, whilst at the same time on a much more microscopic scale, about our individual behaviors, those moments when I decide to do this, or I'm going to say that, or I'm going to physically behave in this way. That's the detail where the magic happens, where the change happens, when instead of just behaving, we think first about the consequence of our behavior in order to adjust the behavior to achieve the desirable consequence. And it's that level of detail. So on a broader scale, you absolutely need to be thinking in the here and now, because we're very future-led. Next time I'm going to get a faster car or a bigger house or a more beautiful girlfriend or whatever the construct is. We don't look at what we've got and appreciate it and love it. And I tell you what, Paul, I've spent the last 8 months of my life selling almost everything. I've sold so much, got rid of so much stuff.
Yeah.
Because I realized that the monastic or Buddhist principles, however you want to phrase or construct them, of simplicity, transcend throughout everything. The more stuff we have, I think, is evident of fulfilling an existential void. So the more you strip everything back, the more vulnerable you are to focus on you and to work out, who you are and what the best way to repair you is. It's a very interesting sort of journey to go on.
We're really immersed in that. We're in this strange construct now where that question is brought up every day and every moment because, restaurants are taken away. Well, let's go deeper. We're not seeing each other in person. We're not hugging. We're not kissing. We're not shaking hands. We're terrified of being near people, at the same time desperately wanting to be near those people.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
So we have this incredibly difficult and line to draw and to cross, and and I come back to that kind of manipulation of negativity that is proliferated through media, social media, whatever. The idea of a new normal is such, I hate the term. It's such a nonsense. It's an absolute nonsense.
Absolutely, I agree.
Because there is no normal.
Yeah.
because
and also normal is relative for each individual person, right? Your normal
Absolutely.
is entirely different to my normal.
so this
And we are a species; it's adaptive. We're changing all the time. So there's no status quo for normal. Like
Yeah.
what it's the new normal thing is. Oh God, it's so annoying.
So,
So annoying.
oh, we've set this up, and this is the new normal, and this is how performers will
Sure.
be. And you're like, no, they won't. They just
Yeah.
won't. That's not true.
Yeah.
And
I hope not. I mean, what a terrible model to get to a new normal.
Oh.
Like, no, thank you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Where are you from originally?
Geographically, England. I was born in Buckinghamshire.
Right. Okay.
Why do you ask?
You got a funny accent.
Very strange. Seriously, is that what you're saying?
No. No, I asked because what's interesting.
Not related, if that's where this is going.
Thank God for that. I mean that in a non-theistic way as well. It's funny. Atheists often say "thank God." I always find that interesting. No, I'm interested in the sense you've travelled a lot.
Yeah, with work though.
With work and living. Did you live in London?
No, I've never lived in London.
Oh, okay.
No. You might be forgiven that. It's how often I'm there.
You're there, yeah. No, so you're often in a hotel in London.
Yeah, I've travelled in a way that has impacted me, I think, in both a positive and a negative way. The negative way, I think, is the positives are probably obvious, but the negative is that when I got married, there was discussion about where the honeymoon would be. And my first thought about honeymoon was, oh gosh, that's like flying. And so we discussed hotels. And I thought, oh God, well, the hotel's going to have to be at least the sort of level that I'm used to at conferences. So we're looking at immediately kind of, conference 5-star.
Oh, no, sorry.
Yeah, the back of a pub. So I was like, oh, but it's going to feel like work. So in the end, we ended up going out into the middle of the Costa Rican jungle, which was wonderful.
Right. Okay.
But my point is that it's ruined that element because travel for me is work. 15 years of flying and staying in hotels. I've got a system that has been, perfected down to a T. Everything goes in the same pockets. The bag is the same every time. There's a duplicate of everything. So when you enter, and I'm doing that on my own. So when you bring somebody else into that equation, it screws everything up. You're like, oh, hang on a minute. I've got to wait for you. And you don't have the app that I've got. And there's a ticket thing. And I have to go this way and you have to go that way. And I've traveled tons and seen some wonderful things. But my point, coming back to this, I got a bit sidetracked.
That's right.
I have not traveled in the way that most people travel. And I miss the fact that actually, lots of my friends have been traveling.
Right.
They have bummed around till they fancy moving on. They've done nothing for a few days apart from see the local sites, eat some food, meet some local people, moved on when they want to move on. I've traveled to 24 countries. I forget how many hundreds of cities, but I land at the airport, a car picks me up, takes me to the conference suite. I do the job or stay overnight, do the job, and then I'm almost immediately coming back again. Now, that's been my life for 15 years because up until recently, my diary has been so chocker that I don't have time to... People say, you should stay for an extra day or you never walk around the city. I wanted to do that almost every time I've flown anywhere, but my diary doesn't allow me to do that. My manager will say, what flight do you want back? And I will say, what time does the job finish? And they'll say, I don't know, you've finished speaking at 3:00 or something. I'll say, well, have we got like 5? I need to get back. So while I've traveled, it sort of doesn't feel like I've traveled. I feel like I tell you a lot about aeroplanes, airports, and how terrible taxi drivers are.
Yeah. No, I mean, I'm thinking about one of the corporate events where it was 2 countries a week, over a month, in and out, and everyone and people would say to you, "Oh, but you're in Rome.
Yeah,
it must be so lovely." How was
physically, I'm in Rome.
Yes.
Yeah.
How was the food? And you're like, well, I sort of had their banquet, and I kind of ate something in the hotel, and
and hotel food is never really local food or real food because they're catering for an international delegate, right? So you go to a hotel in Rome and you're going to eat burger and chips, and you go to the same everywhere else,
And also, the client says to you, "Well, why don't you stay a few days?" And even if you could, it's like, well, I don't really want to.
Yeah,
I'm on my own. I'd rather you paid me. I have the money, and then I can choose to go on a trip to somewhere that I want to be. So it's
I understand.
So you what was did you start off as a magician? What was where does that come from?
Creatively, where does magic come from as a performer?
Yeah, what were you planning on doing as a kid?
I think a magician. So when I was younger, I got into magic. Same story that most magician has.
You were locked in a wheelie bin, abused.
Yeah.
Showed you
your story is quite unique. Well, it can't be quite unique because if you're unique, it was not. Into magic as a kid. I joined the Magic Circle's youth initiative, so the Young Magicians Club, which I think my parents just were like, "Oh, get that out of his system." Right? They joined the Magic Club and entered a couple of competitions. The Young Magician of the Year. There's a very interesting story about the Young Magician of the Year competition in 1999, I believe, and they were given an hour to deliberate on who should win. And it took almost 2 hours. And apparently I was the subject of the great discussion that took so long because I did a comedy act and I had, I don't know, say there were 6 judges. I had 4 judges saying, or 3 judges, I guess it would be saying, he should win, or we should place him or whatever. It's great, it's funny, it's entertaining. And then the other judge was saying, but there was not enough magic, and this is a magic competition. And so I only ever got to the finals of the Young Magician of the Year. I never got placed. So I did that for a bit. And obviously, I guess that gave me a platform to perform properly rather than just, I don't know, at a school or something. And so I started doing little, but people would ask, like, this is so long ago, Paul, I don't know the details of this, but I guess it's like, people find out that you do magic and they say, oh, could you, would Jez come and do some performing at my kid's birthday party or something? And so you get paid like, I don't know, 20 quid or I don't know, some, small amount. And that became quite a nice little sideline. And even when I was starting to study in my late teens and working in the NHS, that sideline of doing a bit of magic on the side was quite nice. It was like we were talking a secondary job. I'd do a little bit of close-up magic in some restaurants or cafes, locally, and it's what it's like. It's just someone sat there and they happen to have a business and they say, "Oh, we're doing a Christmas party." You just pick up a bit of work here and there. And then I started to get really into it and sort of built a bigger business around it and moved into mind reading because I had a very, very good friend who had made the transition from being a sort of magician to a mind reader, and that fitted perfectly with my interest in psychology and behavior that I was studying, what I was doing. And then what people have to understand is there was a seismic shift in magic as a performing craft at that time. When David Blaine became massive and made street magic, so prior to that, I think it's fairly safe to say, and this is a slight generalization, that magicians were performing on tables and in a slightly contrived environment. David Blaine came along and said, I'm just walking down the street and I'll show you some magic, with no props, nothing, here I am. And that created a massive shift. And so magicians were like, oh, wow, this is a fresh new way of performing magic. Let's go that route. And so everybody went that route, so I went the other route. I said, okay, well, mind reading. No one's doing mind reading. No one's doing any mind magic. There were at that point. So that almost became my full-time job. And there were, I think, 6 of us in the UK. Graham Jolly, Mark Paul, Drew McAdam, me, I think Ian Keeble, bizarrely, because he's a comedy magician, but I'm sure he was doing some sort of, or was sort of in that mind reading group. So the sort of full-time only mind readers, or putting yourself out as a mind reader. Maybe it wasn't Ian Keeble. Anyway, and then Derren Brown came along,
right?
And overnight, just like David Blaine, everyone went, "Oh wow! There's a new rush!" It was like a Muppet sketch where they go, "Oh go over here, over here!" And so everybody then overnight became a mind reader
and grew a goatee.
Yeah, sure. And overnight, everybody was a psychological magician, and so it's at that point actually that I sort of left and went, you know what? I think I'm done with all this. I'm done with all this copycat behavior, and also it severely impacted my income as well, because suddenly everybody was doing the thing that previously only 6 people were doing.
Right.
So, so that then left, but I've always done it in the background because I've got quite a unique collection of magic books and magic knowledge in sort of 3 quite specialist areas, I suppose. And so in the background, I did a bit of consultancy where people would say, can we pay you for you to explain how this works, or can you help me with this? And I carried on collecting posters and books and that kind of stuff. And it's never left me. Even though I wanted to reject it and say, oh gosh, I hate the way that these people perform and the way that magic's become and whatever, I couldn't let it go. It's a part of me. And even though it's a small area of that my life is dedicated to, and a small area of my overall income, it's still very much a part of my identity, and I love it. So that I guess is, in a nutshell, is my magic journey. But it continues all the time, creating, all the time thinking, oh, that's interesting. I wonder if I could do something with that, or how does that change things? Or I will take, perhaps slightly arrogantly, a look at what somebody else has done, and I'll say, oh, that's interesting. How can I make that better? How can I? What do I think they've done wrong there or missed there, and how could that be bigger?
Yeah. And
so
you
it's
are
a creative outlet, I suppose.
You are the Unusualist as well.
Yeah, sure. Yeah,
which is a great title.
That's my moniker. Well, of course, not unique to me either. There have been 3 Unusualists prior to me. One, Paul Daniels actually used the moniker Unusualist for a while. In his early club days. Prior to him, there was another guy. So that would have been maybe 50s. And Raymond Crowe probably most famously has used the Unusualist as well. But so it's not unique to anybody.
Yeah.
I trademarked it. But
Max used it as well.
Oh yes, Max used it a bit. Yes,
Max
that's true.
Sunset,
Yes, yes, that's right. And that, so I don't use my name at all. It's not. It doesn't appear any.
No, but very different. I mean, very much your style, and you have a very kind of elegant. Stylistically, you're elegant, but performance-wise, you are. I would say, you're a very driven performer. You're very comedic. You're what I like in performers, in what I think is good in magic.
Kind of you to say.
Well, and that's why, I'm interested in what you have to say and your perception of things, because you understand the idea of performance and presentation and entertainment. The medium you're using happens to be magic or mind reading.
Sure.
That is the medium you're using in order to entertain those people.
Yes.
And for me, and it's a kind of argument in magic, because there are the guys who are it's just about the card trick. And now you're seeing it on Zoom, where you're seeing these card tricks where they go, it'll be this situation. They say, hi, I'm a magician.
Yes. Yes.
I was like, I want
the famous trot shot.
Oh, just want to just cry at that point. I've lost all interest by that point anyway. But some don't, and that's fine too. I get it. I understand. But, you are about a broad entertainment base, and you're drawing on. It's something that I always say is the most important thing that magicians should be doing, and any art should be doing, is looking elsewhere.
Sure. Oh gosh, yeah. Never look in your own industry for inspiration. God, look, it's the worst thing to do.
It is the worst thing to do.
And even if you get obsessed with what other people are doing, to this end, somebody challenged me on this recently. Somebody set up a group chat on LinkedIn with some speakers who were sort of saying, what do we do? The industry's gone. Mm-hmm. The arse has fallen out of our industry. What are we going to do? And I didn't know any of these people. I knew the person who connected, like 6 of us or something. And I said, look, cards on the table. I don't know any of these people, and I don't hang around with or really have any friends. I've two friends in the speaking industry. A couple of people I know to call. Everybody seemingly knows me, but I just don't hang around with people. I don't talk to people. I don't want to be influenced by what they're doing. I don't want to know. And also, when I first started speaking, speakers generally had this kind of cookie cutter approach because they'd all been to, like the PSA or something like that, or they'd been on some training course that said this is how you form a speech, and so then they all look and sound the same. It's like comedians that they all come out of the same school, and you go, oh, they studied there because the tone and the intonation and the rhythm is the same. Yeah, and I didn't like it. I was like, okay, well that's fine. If that's what speaking is, I think I'm just going to do my thing and see if they like it or not. And if they don't, I'll have to learn that. But I don't really like that. And so from very early on, I created my own path unintentionally. I wasn't going, I'm going to create a new way of speaking. I was just going to be me. And it seems to have served me very well. So on this LinkedIn chat, I was saying, I don't know any of you. I don't generally hang around with other people.
And I hate what you're wearing.
Yes, absolutely. Sorry. But I think the people in 1890 have got a lot to share. So one of the guys pushed back and said, why haven't, why don't you hang around with other speakers, or why don't you have I'm interested to hear your reason for that. And I thought that was, it's quite an interesting point. The same goes for what you were saying about magic as well. Now, the Unusualist is a character that is still settling and tweaking. I'm still going off on a tangent, and I come back and think, should it be more of that? Should it be not? And there's a bit that balances that really it should just be what you think it should be, right? It should be you, or it should be wherever you naturally perform, right? Yeah. If you have to force something, it possibly isn't going to be right. Sometimes that's wrong, of course, and you'll know that as a director, that sometimes actually being forced to do something can be a great thing. Yeah. But often you've got to find the balance first, I think, and say, okay, just tweak, go up a bit with that. That's a great bit, and then it will kind of tip you, go, it's a new balance. But the point I was going to make was that I sincerely believe that if you look at all great magic performers, and this may translate in dance or music or elsewhere, I don't know. But I sincerely believe that all the great magic performers do not focus on magic. The magic is an ancillary thing, because the problem with magic inherently is I know how it's done and you don't. So there's immediately an assumption,
disconnect
problem. Maybe a disconnect, a problem with the balance, in that I'm more intelligent than you are, but I'm not going to tell you. I'm going to withhold that information, so you will remain less intelligent than me. So that you've got that immediately. The setup is that, right? Yeah. So without anything else, it remains that. It remains, ta-da! Look what I did, and I know how it's done, and you don't. Whereas if you look at all of the great magicians as performers, it's about something more. Now, as an audience member, you might not know what that something is, and it might not be articulated. In my case, it's entertainment. We're all going to come together and we're going to have fun, and I'm going to show you some stuff. Interestingly, I do no mind reading anymore. It is all magic. I've gone full circle. Right. I don't know why that is, but it feels right for the character. And the interesting thing for me creatively, to sort of bring this back on form, is that one of the things I've been developing for some time is a show that is only card tricks. So here's the thing. This is where this started. I had spent 15 years of my life entertaining people in the context of teaching them, so talking, with just me. I have no props. I don't perform. I don't do something. There's no magic. There's no song. I just stand on a stage and I talk to people and hold their attention for 60 minutes, 90 minutes. And they clap at the end and they say that they enjoyed it. Okay, so it's a complete circle. Why can't that happen? I've got nothing. I have no props. I travel around the world as a magician, lugging around this case, right? And I've spent 8 months getting that as small as possible when I realized that actually it was about me, right? It's about the entertainment. It's about the performer. It's about the energy. And that's not for everybody. Not everybody can do that, right? It's like telly. So, not everybody can present on TV.
Yeah.
They can't transmit warmth or energy. They can't bring you in. That's a skill or a craft, or I don't know. Maybe you learn it. Maybe it's something you're born with. I don't know. But I love the construct that a deck of cards, if you could capture their attention for 60 minutes, it's not about the cards, is it? It's about the entertainment, the stories, the whatever. But it's more difficult than it seems, interestingly enough. And I haven't quite, the problem is, I think the secret is working out why it's difficult. And I haven't quite worked that out. I haven't quite worked out why, because visually you could say, oh, I'm going to entertain you and I'm still me. I'm still going to entertain the same way, same style of funny, same style of entertainment with a spool of thread, and that's going to go away. And now it's going to be some salt, and that's going to go away. And now it's going to be a deck of cards, and that's going to go away. And now it's going to be a kettle, and now it's going to go away. Maybe there is something about it being visually different that draws you in and keeps it, maybe builds a suspense. There's a peak of intrigue. Oh, what's this? Oh, what's this? Deck of cards is linear, right? It's the same prop throughout the whole thing. I'm experimenting with that at the minute. That's what's going through my head, is maybe that's the rub, the problem. But that, I think, is very creatively interesting, that you could maintain somebody's attention. It's not unique. There are other performers that have, had whole shows. I mean, gosh, Ricky Jay, right? And there's a couple of sequences in there, like cups and balls and some other stuff. But it's because it's Ricky Jay. It's not, I mean, the card tricks happen to be freaking brilliant, and the magic happens to be beautiful, but it's Ricky Jay. It's that.
But Guy Hollingworth has done it. John Armstrong does it. John Armstrong here, he can rock a deck of cards for eternity.
And of course, the interesting thing about John is, you got Tiny Plunger, right? So there's a peak of interest there. There's there's a deck of cards is there, but hang on. So now there's this little cute thing, right? And that's my point, is that if it was just a deck of cards, right, but you've got a couple of things to throw in. Even Ricky Jay did that with the little wind-up toy animals, right? So yeah, something I think is creatively very interesting.
But you're still even within that limitation. So, the limitation is challenging, and sometimes the limitation helps you focus and be even more creative in a smaller area. And therefore that small thing becomes bigger, resonates.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
It's like we were saying earlier, it's low-hanging fruit.
Yeah.
It's easy to do loads of different magic with different props, because the easy win is, oh, there's something new. Oh, there's something new. Oh, there's something new. The detail is in, that looks difficult. What could I do with that? It's like the kettle. Hardly anybody, the kettle's been around for hundreds of years. But the reason people don't perform it is because it's difficult. It takes time, and it's liquid, right?
So
and
explain the kettle for those who don't know what you're talking about.
The kettle is a drinks kettle. I've had numerous over the years, but it is a kettle which pours any drink that you think of. And I have
only master magicians can actually facilitate that.
I have 6 or 8 people in the audience name a drink, whatever they can think of. I don't have a book. They don't choose from anything. It's not forced. They choose the drink. And then I pour each one of those drinks one at a time from the kettle. They are tested and tried and verified to be the genuine drink. And I even ask people, if there's a particular whiskey like a vintage or a particular wine. Maybe it's not red wine. Maybe it's a Rioja. Maybe it's a particular 1998, or it won't be that now, will it? That'll be off. A 2014 Rioja or something like that. And it pours. And then at the very end, I remove the lid. There's a surprise, a little kicker that I won't tell people about, but ultimately it's shown to be empty and it is given out and to be examined. And if the conditions are right, I sign the kettle and I give it to the host, and they keep it as a little souvenir. That's the kettle ultimately.
So that is, that is a stunning
Taking me all
effect.
over the world.
Yeah, and that's huge. And so it has a built-in. I think there it is. It has a built-in narrative. It's almost the kettle has it's very clear. The narrative is very clear. The deck of cards is not so. It's harder to find that narrative.
Yes.
You have to search for it a lot more. And what you tend to see is the amateur version of that. There were 4 robbers and four maidens.
Yes,
and the 4 robbers, and that's not interesting to anybody. And so we have to find that narrative. It's like when I do my 3-card Monty routine, which I did at the Magic Castle.
I've seen.
You've seen?
I've seen that.
Yeah. And it's not new. Nobody, I didn't invent it.
Sure.
It's based on a 3-card Monty routine that conmen did. But then I thought about it in context, and I thought about who am I, and so my routine was about the conmen on the bridges over the Thames.
Did a bridge, yeah.
And they
London
would,
Bridge.
and they would, get you up there, and you put your money, and this is it, and I bring you into the thing, and it's comedic, and that's me, and it's relevant to me, it's true.
Yep.
And it's something that if you did steal that routine, you could do the magic. I think that's interesting. You could do the magic, but you couldn't do the routine.
Yeah.
Because it wouldn't be me.
Sure.
So your kettle trick is you. What's interesting about it is we come full circle to that. What's interesting is it's you doing it. That, yes, the kettle's amazing. The effect is fabulous. But it's more than that. It's the fact that it's you. And what will make it more and more interesting is the fact that you know yourself, and therefore you're translating that into the effect and to the audience. And that's impossible not to.
Yes, well, and that's the point, is that it's the detail. So, if you walk into a room and there are some light bulbs that are blown, and there's cobwebs, and there's paint peeling off, and the carpet's dirty, you'll pick up on all of those things.
Mm-hmm.
You walk into a room and all of the light bulbs are fine, and the floor's been hoovered, and it's, the decor is fine. You don't pick up on those. The positive things, the things that make a situation right, we don't pick up on, because there's a sweet spot where everything's just kind of perfect. You might say, oh, it's clean and fresh in here, but you don't point them all out.
Yeah.
As soon as something's wrong, you notice it a mile off, right? You'll notice the scruffiness of the performer, or the fact that his shoes are dirty, or his hands are dirty, or you'll notice it just like that. But the detail, the tiny, tiny elements that come together, and this doesn't have to be magic. This is life, right? The little tiny details that when they come together, they elevate something immediately to something much better, I would say a place of extraordinary ability. It's almost like subconsciously your brain ticks them off and go, oh, hang on a minute. Now, this is worth looking at, or worth spending time on, or worth, investing in, because somebody's thought this through. There's a lot of detail that's gone into here. And of course, it's not hardly ever a conscious conversation that's going on. There's just, I don't know what it is. There's, at a subconscious level, we know, we almost relax. We go, oh, okay, here we go. Because if I was to bring out a modern deck of cards, for example, or a modern, like I could never do anything with an iPhone. There are some wonderful pieces of magic with iPhones, but it would jar. It would just be like, oh, suddenly that doesn't work. And the lengths I've gone to be able to, I look at a routine and I think, oh, I love that. And 2 things have happened over the last probably 12 months, because I've really been focusing a lot in the last 12 months on a number of things, actually. But one of them is what's right for me. You know, there are hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of magic routines that exist in the world. And some of them I adore. And I've tried, but they're just not right for me. Strike it off, move on. Because when you find the one that's right for you, you've got something for life, right? Mm-hmm. It's the detail within the detail almost.
Or maybe not for life, you know, because there's,
Sure.
there is that real thing. It happens in magic a lot, actually, is that people don't know when to let go of the thing that they've been doing for 20 years. And it's the same as the jokes. You know, the jokes you get away with in your 20s, you can kind of get away with in your 40s.
They'll all be being rewritten when we go back to work anyway, I think.
Yeah, that's true. God, there's going to be no blowing on this, is there?
No touching this.
No touching this. There's going to be no performance until there'll be socially distanced performance. That's going to be the first thing that will come back in a close-up magic kind of vibe, for sure. It's already happening. And
it's something I've done for years. I mean, I politely turn down any invitations to do close-up magic. You know, I sit at a space and you come to me. And what happens is, it's interesting. A lot of performers find it very difficult to sell. I find it very easy to sell. But I guess that's because I know what it is.
You know, exactly. Absolutely. That's 100%. You know, that was when I took my close-up act to the Magic Castle. Previous to that, a formal close-up act, it's kind of you were doing reception drinks going up to people in groups, so it's a mini stand-up cabaret. You would go round tables interrupting the intermission between courses. Which you know, and you might do a performance to the room as a cabaret, or you might do a cabaret show, So you know your close-up effects, and you know how they're going to work, but you don't really sequence them together in a narrative in a show because it's not necessary. The only narrative will be in the cabaret, but at the castle, it's a formal close-up show. So it's sort of a parlor show, and it's kind of what you're doing. That's what you're already doing. So when you suddenly have to do that thing, and you have to think about, yes, the people are coming. It's lovely. It changes everything. The people come to you. You are controlling the stage, and you have a narrative line through. You know where you're going to beginning, middle, and end, and you know where it's going to go. But you improvise, of course, within the framework of what's out there.
Sure.
But that's definitely wonderful. It changed everything. It changes everything because then just to go up to people randomly and do magic tricks, it's just not the same. And I think that, and I think intrinsically that's the actor in you as well, because you know you are an actor as well. You are a performer. That's you have a character. Yes, it's you, but your character within the context of your show is a different version of you. It's not you. Sure. And that's really, really lovely and fascinating. I want to take us on a couple of steps now, because you bought a farm.
Yeah.
As you do.
It's the worst thing I've ever done in my life, but also probably equally the most rewarding.
So this was literally, how many years now?
November 2016.
Right. So
4 years this year.
Wow. Okay. And there were a few. Where is it?
Lincolnshire.
Lincolnshire. Beautiful. Near Peterborough. We went out to dinner in Peterborough. Beautiful little town there. And
Peterborough? It's horrific.
No, where we went was really nice. We went to that little old bit. Didn't we?
Yes, we did. Yes, it was really sweet. Yeah.
Thank goodness for that. Okay. Never disagree with me again. No. And you've got this lovely, it's lovely now. I came and planted lavender.
You didn't, Paul. You moaned about a relationship that was moped about a relationship that was breaking up, which is exactly why you came, actually, and you were welcome to do that. But to say that you planted lavender would be a gross overstatement. I planted lavender and you watched. However, because I'm a good
with
friend,
my tears.
yes, you did. Because I'm a good friend, I've named the lavender strip after you. So it's called the Rothman Drive.
And it's
a very long 48 lavender bushes, I think we planted that day, something like that.
Yeah, it was amazing. It's beautiful. So you bought this farm. It was run down. There was nothing. What was there? There wasn't much. Was there a house there?
The house was neglected. I mean, I'm always at odds as to whether it was run down, define run down. You know, the septic tank that had failed, a roof that fell in after 3 days, the central heating system was broken, the water was running straight from a borehole, so it was staining everything. The shower didn't work. Define run down. Some people go, oh, it wasn't run down, it was livable. I'm like, well, maybe it was for some people, but it was where I live is an acre. The house is on an acre of what was grass and concrete. There was one very small little bed. I wouldn't even call it a flower bed. There was a tree and a load of overgrown sort of brambles in it. And a couple of established trees, but it was just flat grass and concrete when I moved in.
And you had problem after problem after problem after problem every
for almost a year.
Yeah.
It was horrific. I mean, after 3 months or 6 months, we considered selling it, but it was in such a sort of half-assed, half-fixed state. I don't think anybody would have bought it anyway.
Yeah.
It was horrific. I'm writing about it in the book. It's actually quite cathartic. It's almost like therapy.
Is that in the existential book?
Yeah, the new book. Yeah.
Has it got a title?
It has a working title of Nature Nurture.
Right. So is that going to be looking at where you are now, or is it?
It's a journey from moving into the farm and how connecting with nature transformed my life, and how nature ultimately took me from a place that I was recognized in as Existential Crisis and saved me through that period of my life. Yeah.
So what, at the time where you're rebuilding the house, are you going through this existential crisis? Is this something that's part of your existence at that moment, or is it something that predated it and that helped you to the next stage?
The existential crisis, I would say, had been going on for a long time, and I realized it when I moved here because of a number of series of pressures and various sort of different things that had happened. But it was reconnecting with nature. It was seeing how patient nature is, and how that annual rhythm of growth in the spring and abundance in the summer and withdrawal in the autumn, and the dormancy and preparation of the winter, and then the growth in the spring, and because when you're digging up an acre and when you're planting and nurturing plants and you're cutting stuff back and you're learning about all of this stuff, and also with bees, you're so intrinsically very close to them that you're dealing at such a close level that you can be nothing but close and connected, and ignore everything else, because you're physically closer as well. And you learn so much. There's so much. Humans have been ignoring nature for longer than we've been learning from it. And yet the answer to everything is outside that window of yours. It is remarkable. You look at everything bad that's happened in nature, and it's because humans screwed it up.
And look at, now under the COVID pressures, people have been growing vegetables. People have looked at their balconies, their gardens. They've got tomatoes.
Those are specifics. What people have been doing is reconnecting with nature through myriad different ways, like planting seeds or whatever. And globally, social media is awash with how they've been enjoying spending time going for walks, looking at trees, growing vegetables, tending to their gardens, creating their gardens, whatever it may be, simply because they had nothing better to do, right?
Yeah.
But it's fascinating how people have the rhetoric is that they feel better because of it and they've enjoyed it. It was there all the time. It's free.
Well, and that ties into kind of immunity and health, be it mental health and physical health, and
Sure.
they are intrinsically linked.
Yeah.
They work to each other. They communicate with each other, and things like going for a walk, outside, people suddenly going and exploring their where they live. I mean, in LA, people never walked anywhere. Suddenly they're walking in the neighborhoods.
Sure.
Suddenly they discover a butcher's.
Yeah.
They didn't go to Ralph's, which was the supermarket. They went, oh my God, there's a butcher's. Oh, look, they do, organic farm grazed meat. And you're like,
Sure.
oh wow, oh this is worth it, isn't it?
Yeah.
We've been spending all this money on these crazy restaurants, expensive, rubbish, blah 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 blah. So you got through this period, and you really committed to building this fabulous farm. It's a beautiful house, and you've got a little work house. I don't know how to describe it.
The barn?
The barn, where people come, seminars. It's where we did our course there. And also, you started farming, and you created an organic farm.
Sure, yeah, a certified organic farm. So we became Soil Association certified because I realized I was starting from scratch. So I had a choice. I had a choice about whether I put pesticides and nasties and stuff. And something just didn't resonate with me, that it didn't seem right to be punishing the soil and punishing the environment. We were doing enough to beat the environment up. And by that point, it'd given so much back to me. I sort of felt intrinsically like I should sort of care for it and nurture it. A huge responsibility taking on a big piece of land because of what you potentially can do with it, right?
Yeah.
And for future generations, and that sounds a little bit pious, but, I'm not going to be here forever. And we've created something that's not going away. It would take a lot of work to get rid of what we've done.
Yeah.
So somebody else is going to enjoy it, and we went from not really seeing any wildlife to, in one season, 31 different species of birds and 28 different species of bumblebee on one strip of bed that we planted, all in one time. It was an absolute feast of bees, honeybees and bumblebees. And so we've attracted so much, here. For the first time ever, the other evening, I saw a hedgehog, which was really lovely. Because the hedgehogs in this country are now rare. I had no idea. They were, it's literally like not many left at all. And
you took on bees. So this is the interesting. You are not just a farmer. Is it a bee farmer? Is that the correct term?
Yeah, honeybee farmer.
Honeybee farmer. So you actually bought, I guess you bought. What did you do? You bought.
Didn't steal them. So I started. So what happened was, as part of the organic process, and we will. I'm just looking at time. We're going to wrap this up because I've got people who will start coming for work because I got super early to speak to you. But the dogs will go mental in a second. And they've been very well behaved, actually, sleeping here with very empty tummies.
Very good.
So with the organic thing, I thought, well, it goes hand in hand, doesn't it? You need to get chickens and bees and, self-sustainability and yada, yada, yada. And the bees pollinate everything and full circle. And that was my kind of very rudimentary understanding of it back then. And I became addicted, just totally drawn in. And my source for honeybees was a friend of mine's parents who is a very successful commercial honeybee farmer. Mm-hmm. So he has 800 honeybee hives to produce honey. So that was my start. And so I became addicted, and so addicted that I really went for it big time. I thought, okay, so back to what we were saying before. Okay, we've got it. We've established as a organic farm. What else now? How can I make that better? Surely there's somewhere we can go from there. So then we became the world's first certified carbon neutral honey farm. So got carbon neutral status. And now I'm like, what now? How do I, and it's not about awards. It's not about collecting stuff. I'm selling stuff. I'm cleansing my life. I don't need stuff. It's about how do we get better at what we're doing? And it's not necessarily about recognition either. It's entirely self-centered. So we've gone from organic. So how do we be better than organic? Well, carbon neutral is better than organic, because that's really amazing. Now what there? Same thing when we got, if you give me a goal or a set of objectives, I'll want to smash them and then some to sort of, I guess, maybe, a therapist might be listening and saying, well, you're proving yourself to others, or you're proving yourself to yourself. Maybe there's that at an underlying level. I don't know. But what I like is that rather than it just being collecting stuff to make me look good, like awards or whatever, it's very much about what can we do to better what we've done, which is bettering the environment, right? Everything, our golden thread is about a positive impact on in the environment and sustainability. So then the next step for the bees was, well, let's not keep these bees, because this particular type of bee is imported. It's not native to this country. Mm-hmm. So it has a carbon footprint, and there is a slight biosecurity risk, and it's also not geographically adapted. So that's when last year I started breeding and reintroducing the native British honeybee. Wow. So we're one of very few, I could possibly, I'd be guessing a bit. I've got a fairly good handle on what people are doing in the bee world. We might be one of 10, maybe, not even that many places in Great Britain that are actively breeding and reintroducing the native British honeybee. So yeah, that's where we are now. It's come, but the golden thread, it sort of feels like we've gone on a journey and then it's gone, and now he's taking this big leap and he's in this fun. The golden thread is about changing people's behavior, the way they think and feel about now the environment and culture. I'm still actively, working in the corporate sector, and that's very much about how we think and feel about me, my contribution to the workplace, the people I work with, what we do when we're together. How can that be better? It's the same stuff, Paul. It's just that now I'm sharing more of my personal life. I've always been very, very, very private person. But moving to the farm has sort of eroded me a bit. And coming through that existential crisis, I've realized that you don't have to be the toothpaste commercial guy where everything's perfect and you've got, amazing teeth and everything's wonderful. You don't have to be that person. You can be you. And there is a hunger, coming back to something you said about social media, which I scoffed at because I hate it. There is a hunger for sincerity and genuineness. Yeah. In your society, because it's something that fundamentally has been missing, I think, for a long, long time, reserved for religion, reserved for Buddhism, reserved for perhaps monasteries, these private places where people learn about self and about stripping away, excess. Now I think it's becoming a bit more of a social, something that society is embracing.
I think you come through a lot of things. You mature. You hopefully you learn through your experiences, and they build and they move you forward. And then there is that ability to change and to develop more than change. I think development is the key. Yeah. And it's hopefully. So if anyone wants to, you sell your honey. Your honey is available.
Yes, we do.
Yeah. How do
we find you? Honey.
How do we find your honey? I've had your honey.
You can, yes, you've had some of our
different ones actually.
Yes, that's right. We've got we just launched. We're not officially, so this is like a scoop. We're just
by the time this comes out, be sold out anyway.
Yeah. We've relaunched the brand and gone for a very artisanal feel. So we have 7 different honeys at the minute. We're just about to launch an 8th. There's a 9th coming out, and we are in the early stages of producing a mead to a traditional recipe that's over 100 years old that I found. I've had to piece it together on a wild goose chase. It's taken me ages because the person who owned the recipe didn't want anyone to know it, and it's fragmented all over the place, and I brought it together. So you can go to buybritishhoney.co.uk jezrose.co.uk and navigate across. The farm is at beesand.co, and join me on social media at that Jez Rose.
At that Jez Rose. We'll put all the links and stuff.
So you should.
Listen, it's been a delight. It's been
lovely catching up.
Lovely. It's been, to be honest with you, this is a conversation we have anyway. We talk about these things. And I think
it's largely about you.
It's mainly about me. So
Thank you for your insight. You've some really interesting questions today, and some nice probing. I feel gently probed by Paul, and that's it's always a change.
Yeah, and not many people get to experience a gentle probing from me.
I need to urinate now. I hope this is wrapping up.
This is it. I was just bringing it all together, pulling the threads together, and just saying thank you.
Thank you.
So, and what were the three things that you said, that teacher said, that you took to
dignity, love, respect.
Dignity, love, respect. I think on that bombshell, I think that's a perfect way to wrap it up. So, thank you, Jez.
Bye-bye, Poppet.
See you soon.